Hope you guys are doing good. So we are just about to start. We have not done any reading so far, and we were just discussing Knut's reading. I have only read his articles, never quite his books. He's most famous for Infinity Divided by 21 Million, but he's also known for a couple of other books, Sovereignty Through Mathematics and Independence Reimagined. I think Mango has the pirated PDF for that. And yeah, Bitcoin, the Inverse of Crown World is his new book. This released less than 1 or 2 months ago. And I've read the foreword and the preface, and his writings are pretty interesting and a breeze through. So you don't have to be any expert in anything, and yet it covers many domains, which a lot of them are the reason that Bitcoin works, because it studies human action after all. That's the attempt of study of economics and praxeology and evolutionary biology as well. So we'll be studying those things throughout this book. And yeah, as always, please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, have discussions. This is the spirit of the reading club. I have a question about the reading part in general. Yes, Agnivo, please tell me.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so this is not the for the first time you are doing this, right? So I was just wondering, you have also said you haven't read it yet, so you are going to read it for the first time and also sort of in public, right? And we also always, I mean, it's not a easy thing to do, right? I mean, so I'm just wondering, do you treat it like a movie where you don't like spoilers? That's why you'd rather have it like not read it for the first time, so that you want to give the impression of first reading to everyone, or it's just that a coincidence that you haven't read it like.
Right. That's a brilliant question, first of all. So, how I have done it previously is that with gradually and suddenly, I did used to read the material because it was pretty pedantic. It was pretty um, descriptive. It used to go into the details of how exactly money works and how Bitcoin works. But I've read the foreword and the preface and the introduction a few pages as well. This book is not in that style or domain, because this book is, in my limited understanding so far, we'll read this book through. But at least for this session, because we'll only be covering forward, preface, introduction, and if we have time, then incentives, the first chapter as well. So it was a pretty breeze in reading, and it covers a lot of domains of human action, which is, like I said before, praxeology, economics, and evolutionary biology. And none of them were too technical. So at least for me, I did not feel the need to have done the reading before. But yeah, if you, I mean, that's my take on it. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. But yeah, for this session, this will be an interactive session, and if yeah, I don't know if I can call it a movie. I hope I can be of that um, value of value to you guys. But yeah, that will be my 2 cents on how useful it is. Yep, yep. Okay, Agnivo, if you have any uh, feedback and inputs, as always, feel free. So we'll start with the foreword, and we'll carry from there. Forward, there are various writers known for their humorous, light, and engaging writing styles, but sometimes their content falls short, appearing shallow, disorganized, or misleading. Conversely, some authors excel in delivering concise, comprehensive, and accurate insights to their readers. However, their writing style might come off as overly pedantic, pretentious, or even sleep inducing. Then there is Knut Swanholm at the intersection. Wait, I the good kind of intersection, entertaining style and great content. There's also the bad kind of intersection, boring style and banal content, but that's not very common among Bitcoin related authors, to be fair. In the realm of wannabe authors, there exist those perfectionist dreamers who pour their hearts and souls into grand ambitions of creating the single perfect, indispensable, timeless book they will never end up finishing. I'm afraid I may be part of this sad cohort, even if not made many efforts to help me get out of it, so far unsuccessfully. Then there exist other more reliable authors who are very prolific, publishing many books that are just disposable, single-use collection of extemporaneous blog posts or transcribed conference talks. So this is a foreword by someone else. I'll let that be a spoiler for now, but he's a known Bitcoin personality. Then there is Note Swanum at the intersection. Wait, I mean the good one again. After enjoying all the previous funny yet insightful books by this prolific yet perfectionist author, I was both humbled and thrilled when Knut asked me to write the foreword to his latest effort. This time a four-hand effort co-authored with Luke DeWolf. More on him later. And since many of our very pleasant conversations tend to end up with the drawing of some Venn diagram, like the one that you will find in the pendulum chapter of this very book, it only seemed fitting to begin such a preface with one. Admittedly, it's a four set diagram, not the typical three set kind I tend to aesthetically prefer, but still I know he will appreciate ending up at the center of it. I first interacted with Luke DeFulf during the recording of my entertaining, at least for me, but I hope for listeners as well, incursions in the Freedom Footprint Show, the podcast he created with Nut and has very successfully run for quite some time at this point. Luke is not as loquacious as Nut and most definitely not as talkative as me. But over those several episodes, I ended up appreciating his role in capturing, provoking, stimulating, and somehow even directing Nut's polyhedric streams of consciousness. I have to say, after reading Bitcoin, the Inverse of Clown World, I can clearly see his beneficial and complementary fingerprints, or better still, footprints all over the place. Now, since both Nut and Luke like to indulge in Bitcoin numerology, as evident from the date they chose to launch their podcast, I leave you to the 21 reasons you should read this book. Yeah, first, just like the podcast, this book was released on Infinity Day, August 21st. So, August 21st has a story which Fractal Encrypt was at the center of. I have not been able to understand it fully, I'll be honest, but the story is that Fractal wanted to create a vanity address, which he wanted to use, I believe, for some reason to create a mechanism through which you can prove to somebody that you are the recipient of the address. And around that time taproot was activated, and this happened because a lot of people saw the need of a vanity address through taproot. And this is still, it's deeply technical, so I was not able to completely understand how that was possible, but it somehow converged on August 21st, which was the release date of Infinity divided by 21 million article with Note. And Note also played a role in that, so it has since been celebrated as the Infinity Day. And this book was now intentionally chosen to be released on the same day to celebrate Infinity Day on August 21st. Second, if you are reading my foreword to this book, it's very likely you already spent some of your precious sats to purchase it. At this point, you may just as well read it. So we have not purchased this book or spent any sats on it. This is Faisal's Kindle. But yeah, we're investing our time into this book. Third, even if you didn't spend any sats on it, Diamond Hands, you probably at least invested some of your scarce time in downloading this book from some piracy site or chat. Pirates are badass and intellectual property is a scam anyway. Fourth, this book is entertaining, simple, flowing, and very easy to read, yet pretty accurate, complete, and compact. Remember that when thing, right? Fifth, this book contains quite timeless analysis, yet it fits very nicely in the already pretty large and fast growing Swan Home section you almost certainly already created in your personal library. Remember that other when thing. Six, this book is about Bitcoin. Seven, this book is not only about Bitcoin, it discusses game theory and praxeology, incentives, and clown world. These are the chapters of the book. It discusses game theory and praxeology, cultural history and geopolitics, invocism and pendulum, biology and sociology, incentives and mind over matter, computer science and metaphysics, in We Are All Satoshis and Mind Over Matter, integrity and honesty, slay your heroes, hill to die on picking, and many other topics. This book also discusses never before revealed secrets about skateboarders and light bulbs. I leave it to you to find out where. This book includes many Bitcoin culture cameos, Easter eggs, and hilarious references. I won't spoil any, have fun finding them. This book showcases the immortal wisdom of many important masters, philosophers, and gurus. To mention only a few, Bill Murray and ABBA. This book mentions me once. You should always read anything that mentions me in a positive or neutral way, that is, always. Reading this book is a good way to deepen your understanding of Bitcoin, but also of its reverse, clown world, your enemy. Reading this book is one way to resist low preference temptations like ingesting seed oils or shilling shitcoins. This book is zero calorie, carbon neutral, gluten free, and vegan, as far as I know. This book can be read by people with blue hair without life threatening effects. This book can be enjoyed by people who, like me and seemingly unlike Nut and Luke, believe in free will, eternal life, the existence of God, and Leibniz monadology. If you meet Nut and Luke at some Bitcoin conference, you can get this book signed. Maybe you could get away with printing a fake cover and wrapping it around another book, but that seems like a lot of wasted effort and unnecessary risk. So, if most of you here are active on Twitter, you can already sense that this book is also on the cultural dimension of Bitcoin, because um, for better or worse, and there are arguments for both, Bitcoin has become cultural as well, and that's only primarily on Twitter and now maybe on Nostr. And so this is going to be the evolution of Bitcoin anyway. At least to me, money is something that not everybody needs to understand the mechanics of, because money is supposed to solve the problem of specialization in trade. More and more humans should be able to lean into what they are good at and not have to understand everything about money. You need to understand basic economics, of course, to be able to build a framework for what money should be and how it should be used, but not to verify every detail of it. And this has already started happening on Twitter. So I'm relatively new to Bitcoin culture. I started becoming active in 2022, 2023. But from what my observations have been, that after 2020 especially, Bitcoin has become more of a cultural thing as well. So it starts with Christianity and meat eating, and yeah, climate change has both ends of the things. There are more Bitcoiners who believe that climate change is a scam, but there are a lot of Bitcoin research. There's a lot of Bitcoin research going into how Bitcoin mining is helping the environment because it's transitioning the world to renewable energies. So there are all kinds of debates and things happening. But for me, at least, this is my perspective or my opinion, that just the fact that Bitcoin culture is becoming more and more of a thing, albeit only on Twitter and Nostr right now, not at least as much in meat space in India. At least I'm not sure about the US. That this is how it's going to be. So this book has a lot of references from that, and yeah, we should expect more of them throughout the book. Reading this book will increase your IQ to 120 or reduce it to 80, in both cases, bringing you to a safe distance from the midwits that populate Clown World. If they ever end up making a movie out of this book, you will be able to surprise your friends at the premiere by anticipating the plot. This book may finally give you a valid reason to use all those quirky Bitcoin themed bookmarks you've collected at Bitcoin conferences over the years. If you don't read this book, you may end up having fun staying poor or owning nothing and being happy. And if, even after all these reasons, you don't believe me about this book or don't get it, I don't have any more time to try to convince you. Sorry, but in the other case, enjoy your reading. This is from Giacomo Zucco, who's the founder of Plan B Network, and he's part of multiple Bitcoin projects. He's a Bitcoin celebrity, and to the best of my understanding, he's also a physicist, and he's been working on Bitcoin open source protocol as well. I'm not sure which specific project, but I know that he has very in-depth opinions about short fork proposals on covenants as well. And I was briefly trying to follow the covenants debate, and yeah, I remember that I was not able to understand because of the lot of the technical trade-offs that different proposals create. But somebody like Giacomo Zocco has made it, from as far as I can recall, that covenants are necessary to scale Bitcoin, but their implementation details is still in debate and in testing. I'll take a pause here if somebody has any thoughts, comments. Okay, yeah, Agniva says, pardon, I can't follow the cultural part. Right. So So yeah, I'll just reiterate my opinion once more. So I mean, if you understand that Bitcoin is has the potential of scaling to sound money for humanity, then all of us realize that not every human and majority of humans will ever run a full node or verify consensus rules, and that's an ideal that we should all strive to. But and it's up for debate. Most people will never do that. Most people will never verify the rules of Bitcoin, and that does not necessarily have to be a bad thing, because that's the problem that money solves. Money solves that humans are able to trade with each other and specialize in what they're good at. So this is the cultural opinion that I have, that Bitcoin eventually will become a culture. You know that this person is good, you know that this technology is helping humanity get more freedom and not fall prey to authoritarian regimes. And this is the core value proposition of Bitcoin, that it has fixed supply, it is a decentralized consensus mechanism, and nobody can control the rules of Bitcoin. And if that is communicated to more and more people, and they can understand it, even if they're not able to understand every detail of it, then Bitcoin has done its job. This is my personal take on it. And on the cultural part of trusting the brand of trustlessness, right? Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So the way I have been thinking about it is just imagining how to scale trust, because every brand in the world, and there are good reasons to say that Bitcoin itself is also a brand. that how brand itself has scaled because people have started to trust it. The problem with banking system is not that it actively coerces you. No bank is ever forcing you to open an account with them. The banking system is able to operate as a failed system only because people still trust it. And I think this is also at the core of this book, The Clown World, that people are not able to see through the bullshit that banking system makes you go through. And that is a problem with the people, in my opinion, because if you understand personal responsibility, you can only as much blame the banking system. At a point, as a grown adult, it's your responsibility to understand how the system works, how the world works, how your life works, what incentives make you work, etc. So the revolution of Bitcoin is not that we have to rally people together and do something about things. It's that we have to create value and store that value for Bitcoin. It's that simple. But for whatever reason, it's not the status quo right now. It's not the mainstream economic philosophy or theory. Most people are studying economics, which is uh, indoctrinated and perpetuated by John Keynes, which is failed to say the least. I'm not sure if somebody is new to that. Please do let me know. We can briefly discuss what Keynesian economics is. But yeah, I'm assuming that most people here are aware. So yeah, that's my take on it. That eventually economics and sound money economics will also become a culture. Will also become a brand, and more people, even if they do not understand digital signatures, even if they do not understand cryptography, will be able to use and appreciate Bitcoin. And we have started to see the early signs of it. If you go on Twitter, you will see that Christians have really started to take a liking for Bitcoin, and not all of them are people who value don't trust verify spirit of Bitcoin, but they value honesty, integrity, and sound money, and that's a win. We don't have to necessarily expect everybody to be able to run a full node or understand consensus rules. But these are personal opinions, and this is of course subject to opinions and debate. This is my current level of understanding. Okay, if no further questions, comments, then I'll start with the preface. My journey in Bitcoins. So this is from Note now. My journey in Bitcoin started when I moved from Canada to Finland. The call to adventure brought me and my wife halfway across the globe. Amidst the COVID-19 lockdowns and crypto hype of early 2021, I found the Sailor series on What is Money show, and I was hooked. I wanted to contribute to Bitcoin in my own way. I was a developer. Uh, I was a developer, so I couldn't contribute directly to Bitcoin itself or to related technical projects, but I was a podcaster on the supremely useful subject of Norse and Finnish archetypical mythology, but the skills translate. I was drawn to Consensus Network, the company that translated the Bitcoin standard into Finnish, the obscure little language I was interested in. I responded to a Twitter call for volunteers and I offered my skills as a podcaster. It was pure synchronicity. They hoped to launch a podcast with one of their authors, the esteemed Knut Swanholm. On August 21st, 2022, the Freedom Footprint Show was born. This book is the culmination of the last 2 years of making this goofy, irreverent, and uncompromising podcast. In 120 episodes and counting at the time of writing, we have conversed with dozens of amazing Bitcoiners, sharpening the ideas that made their way into these pages. We could acknowledge and thank every one of our guests. This book wouldn't have been made without you. Although the answer to the question, when did you start writing this book, is somewhere vaguely between the advent of our separate and melded consciousness and the time of publishing, I recall a specific moment in December 2023 when the process really took off. My wife, pregnant with our first child just at the edge of flying safely, and I visited Note and his family in Spain, desperate for some sunshine and relaxation in the depths of Finnish winter. My apologies, this is not by Note, this is by Luke DeWolf. So this is the story of how Luke DeWolf started becoming a part of Note's project into writing this book. Note and I went for a long walk together, and on the way, we started talking about his ideas for a new book. He had been complaining that he wanted to write but had severe writer's block for the last few weeks. But now the juices were starting to flow. We talked about all the big themes we had been discussing lately on the podcast, with the main one being how Bitcoin directly addresses the problems of the fiat world we find ourselves trapped in. Add our focus on the freedom go upside of Bitcoin, and the book started to take shape. The first time the title cropped up was sometime in the preceding few months on the podcast Naturally. I can't remember the exact episode, but I recall that Note posited that Bitcoin inverts Clown World, or is the inverse of Clown World. Of course, everything divided by 21 million is further mimified by the equation infinity by 21 million. And at that moment, a new equation came to my mind 1 divided by Clown World. I recall that we joked about the idea and even suggested that this could be the title of Nut's new book. Back to our walk in Spain, it was here that we first floated the idea that this could be the theme of the new book, all the ways that Bitcoin inverts Clown World. And how? Through adopting Bitcoin, you can increase your metaphorical freedom footprint. Bitcoin, the inverse of Clown World, was, if not born, fertilized at that moment. Still, the book needed to be written first, but in the ensuing weeks, two things happened that kickstarted the whole thing. First, Nut went on a writing spree, producing the bones of at least 10 potential chapters. Second, my son arrived into the world 5 weeks early at the end of December 2023, which, once he was home safe and healthy, landed me on a period of parental leave unexpectedly early. Between diaper changes and feedings every 3 hours, during which my wife did the majority of the work, if I'm completely honest, but I did my best to support her. I had time to talk to Nut about what he had written. I was as excited as anyone else. I knew Nut Swan Home book, and I was honored when he invited me to help him in the editing process. We sat down together and talked about how the chapters would flow, what needed further elaboration, what was repetitive, what might be missing. Our editing sessions became more and more frequent, and the changes to this book became more and more significant. One day, Nut suggested that we were actually writing this together and invited me to be the co-author. The next time I met Nut in person was during Bitcoin Atlantis on Madeira, an extremely busy but amazingly rewarding week on that paradise island. One conversation in the park across the street from the president's mansion led directly to the pendulum chapter. Further discussions led to the last chapter. We added that which you cannot do without, which I think really ties the book together. Over the ensuing few months, we held a series of increasingly frequent calls, writing, rewriting, and editing this book into its final form. The natural date to release this book emerged as August 21st, 2024, Bitcoin Infinity Day, inspired by everything divided by 21 million meme. When else? We have both poured our hearts and souls into this book. I'm personally extremely proud of how it turned out. Still, there are some quirks you should be aware of. Due to my later addition as co-author, we have written most addresses to you, the reader, from our joint perspective, we. However, there are personal anecdotes from Note that are written from his perspective, I. It doesn't make sense any other way, and we hope you understand. This book is intended for Bitcoiners. Everything Nut and I do together to a certain extent is all about conviction deepening. We hope that you read this book, consider the ideas presented, and take up the call to increase your freedom footprint in the understanding that in doing so, you do your part to invert clown world. We all have our part to play. There is no shortcut, but there is Bitcoin. Yeah. So we haven't started the book yet. This was a pretty long enough preface. I hope that was just a one pause. It was not too boring, but yeah, that was the introduction of how Luke DeWolf became the co-author to the book, and he might join us for the next session in case somebody has any questions for us. For him, just giving a shout out that he will be joining us next week. Yep. One pause, and then we'll start with the book and the introduction. Introduction. In the echoing, somewhat banal words of Michael Jackson, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change, lies a profound call to action that resonates deeply within the hearts of those of us who dare to dream of a better tomorrow. This timeless nugget of wisdom encapsulates the essence of personal transformation and its ripple effect on the societal fabric around us. A journey of introspection and self improvement is not just an act of personal fulfillment, but a pivotal step towards enacting broader, meaningful change in our interconnected world. Right. So this is as profound as it gets because I think Mango puts it beautifully, and that just struck a chord with me when he said it. That if you are somebody who was not a communist in his 20s, then you are heartless, and if you are someone who is not a capitalist in your 30s, then you are naive and stupid. I don't know if I'm misquoting you, Mango. Please correct me if I'm misquoting you, but that was what I
It
believe.
wasn't my quote. It wasn't my quote. It's a pretty popular one.
Okay. Right. Yeah, but I love that quote, and I think, yeah, I can speak for myself at least. I have, if not a, I have been a, if not a communist, but at least somebody who was, for the lack of a better word, just too naive to imagine that why can't world operate in a much better way. This was when I had no fundamental framework to even understand the world in my teens or maybe even early 20s. But I did understand that there's something deeply wrong about the world, and I had, because it's easy, I had nobody to blame but humanity itself. I used to imagine that humanity could be doing so much better. For whatever reason, we are not able to understand each other or come to a place where we can build a world together, or much better world. And I stress on together and we and humanity because I used to believe that all of us are fundamentally ignorant. None of us can claim to know everything. So clearly, life is more mysterious for any human than it is for somebody. Anybody who's genius also has more questions than answers. Is a way that I think of it. So in my understanding, I always had an ink of problem with the world, and my solution for it was getting humans together and doing something together. But as I've started to realize that that's not how things work, because you need to create incentives for humans. It's not enough for you just you to expect that all humans will come to one room, come to one place, and just have consensus about something. Bitcoin works not because it has some rules. It works because it incentivizes the participants to participate in the network and rewards them with, on a technical level, with physical bitcoins, which are the miners. And for any individual participating in the network, it gives you access to global liquidity, it gives you access to a fixed money supply, it gives you access to a trustless form of money which nobody can debase and nobody can manipulate. So it's true on so many levels that any change that begins with asking yourself that how I can contribute value to the world. And yeah, this is my attempt at explaining concept here. But yeah, if somebody is new to Bitcoin, which I don't know if somebody here is, but Bitcoin begins with asking yourself that question, that what is value? I was trying to explain to somebody what is Bitcoin, and I remember another Bitcoiner also helped me understand that when you first introduce Bitcoin to somebody, it might not be a good idea to directly jump into that there's something wrong with fiat money, but to just simply ask them what is value. And if they are, and most people have something very deeply valuable to them, and everybody starts with that question, that what is value? And this is something that I deeply value, and I would do things to ensure that this thing belongs to me and is not taken away from me. And once you understand that fiat currency is literally stealing your time, you are running on hamster wheel just to survive, to meet the basic needs of your life, then naturally the scarcity of time starts to hit you. And even if you're not gone too deep into Bitcoin, you already understand Bitcoin on a very intuitive level. Hmm. Continue reading. Have you ever found yourself lost in the labyrinth of existential questions? Questions like why are we here? What is the purpose of life? Or how many skateboarders does it take to screw in a light bulb? These questions invite us to contemplate our existence and the mysteries surrounding our being. For the curious, the follow up question, wait, but why, soon emerges as a constant companion in our quest for understanding. Our inherent curiosity propels us to challenge the conventional, to look beyond the surface, to seek truths hidden beneath the veneer of societal norms. Yeah. I don't know if somebody's aware, but Wait But Why is actually an excellent blog itself. And I remember I discovered it in my college during very early days of having those existential questions, as this paragraph puts it. I did start having them. I remember, and it was not one day, but I definitely remember that it was one phase of my life. It was not just something that I was always questioning. I was not somebody who was always questioning things and having existential questions. But around when I was 21, I did have start having those questions, and Wait But Why during that time was an excellent resource. So I'll just quickly share that link in case somebody hasn't checked it out. I've been actually I also remember actually emailing him about writing on more subjects. At that time, I was not into Bitcoin, but I think if he writes a Bitcoin article, it would definitely be worth reading. Agnigo has shared something on the chat. I'll read this. Unrelated, read it later. I guess it is hard to pronounce Finnish as much as it is to pronounce foolish. Cricket commentators use it to explain why or why not pacers are able to swing the ball. Right. Yes, I am a cricket fan, so I do know that. Yeah, full ball means when. Is that what you're trying to say here? That a full ball will not swing? Yeah, never mind. I'll continue to read. I remember Aussie Matthew Hayden and the commentator group struggles to pronounce it as it resembled with foolish. They actually spent a good 10 minutes on this topic. Nice, nice. Yeah. Yeah, you mean to say fullish, right? Full length ball. This is my assumption. But yeah, just quickly gliding. I don't know why I'm shilling this blog, but yeah, I definitely have a personal connection with this because I haven't read any of the recent articles, but I'll just quickly also share one article that I think literally also helped me make more sense of my life. Otherwise, I would have wasted more of my time in college. That was on, I think it was on procrastination, but it was actually quite insightful. And I don't know the title of it. I'll probably just look it up later. But this blog is actually excellent. It covers a lot of um, existential and philosophical questions that every human has had a question of. I'm pretty sure it's not a matter of intelligence. It's more a matter of time that not a lot of people have been able to give it the time that they ideally would want to or need to. But every human has had those questions. This is, in my opinion, a personal and deeply true thing about everyone. I'll continue reading. But yeah, just a quick shout out. If anybody has any thoughts, questions, or just a rambling, always feel free to share. As humans, we constantly strive for coherence and meaning. We have constructed elaborate narratives and frameworks to make sense of our surroundings, and we act like these constructs are immutable truths. Yet, reality is far more fluid. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence, we find it challenging to accept novel ideas. The process of updating conventional wisdom is slow and often comes with a lag. Regardless of what we think about them, new scientific insights and shifts in our technological landscape challenge our perceptions. The dawn of the internet stands as a testament to this phenomena. I think this is a pretty brilliant paragraph because it's just sharing my quick thoughts on it. That yeah, I think this goes without saying. Every human strives for coherence and meaning because that is what allow you to operate on a daily basis. Otherwise, everything is too overwhelming if humans try to understand everything. So what we do rather is to create meaning for us. That this is something that I value. This is something that I will invest more and more time with, so on and so forth. And we construct those elaborate narratives and frameworks to make sense of our surroundings, and we act like these concepts are immutable truths, yet reality is far more fluid. Just one quick thought on that. I have been thinking about this might be foolish, but I'll just share this with the group, that time itself is also a construct. It's a human construct because how physics works is that energy is taking more and more forms, and the physical universe, way before life evolved, was just doing that. It was acting on physical forces, dead things acting on physical forces, just because one I mean, if we, I'm not a physicist, but if we understand or subscribe to the Big Bang theory, that there was one point in time when the universe started, when space and time came into existence, and since then energy has been taking different forms. And this is the more concrete truth that we can arrive at, because since life evolved, I believe it's becomes more mysterious or more complex to even try to understand how life would have begun if ever there was even one point. But at least according to the Big Bang theory, there was one point which was roughly about 13.8 billion years ago, when the universe itself started. And that was when energy itself came into space and time, and since then has been taking more and more forms. So in that domain, and I might be wrong, as I've said before, the time itself is just something that is happening. It's a construct that humans create to create more meaning for ourselves, that we create those times that hey, we only have 24 hours in a day, let's try to make the most of them. Hey, we only have about 70 or 80 years of existence, so try to make the most out of it. But human biology itself has patterns that allow us to reinforce that hey, I'm in my 20s, I will look a certain way, I will behave a certain way. When I'm in my 30s, I will look a certain way, and so on and so forth. But all of them are constructs that we create. There is no one universal clock in this universe ever. There's no thing as such thing as a clock. Each body, each human body, each living cell has its own clock. Yeah, which I am no expert on, but I would love to dive deeper into it, which goes into the domain of biophysics and circadian rhythms. Yeah, which are interesting subjects, but I have no expertise on them. Yep. And yeah, this connects back to Bitcoin as well. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence, we find it challenging to accept novel ideas. No better example than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is simply software, a language, or just people hanging out in cyberspace, but for some reason a lot of people hate that, and that leads to all sorts of misconceptions, media narratives, and fear, uncertainty, doubt around Bitcoin, which is I was explaining this to a friend yesterday, that which is so absurd. It's like, just leave us alone with our laptops. We are trying to figure out how money should work and how money can work. If you like something else, please go there. But how could you have a problem with me sitting with my laptop? This is beyond my personal understanding. But yeah, this tells us more about human nature itself, that process of updating conventional wisdom is slow, often comes with a lag, and new scientific insights and shifts in our technological landscape challenge our perception. Yeah, even though internet itself is so new that we are still trying to wrap our heads around what internet does to human mind, human connections. Something like Bitcoin was an offshoot of internet, so understandably so, it is taking a lot of time for a lot of people to understand. For example, social media platforms have revolutionized how we perceive our relationships and positions within the global social ecosystems. They act as a double edged sword, offering us glimpses into the lives of others for better or worse, revealing facets of characters previously concealed in the shadows of our offline interactions. Chances are high that you now view your friends somewhat differently given the knowledge of what they had for dinner last night. Social media is redefining our concepts of community and belonging, whether we like it or not. Yeah, so I did not even mention social media, but I think even more than Bitcoin, social media is still something that every human is wrapping their minds around, because it just came so soon, and so such, I mean, it took a life of its own, so nobody really was orchestrating how social media will be used, how it can have an impact on your mind, on children, on relationships, on society overall. That there are so many debates, right? I think one good example is Nostr already, that we currently are even not able to come to consensus on how social media should work. More and more Bitcoiners are realizing that social media should also have open source software, so that we can all know what filtering mechanisms prevent us from seeing certain information, and we should be able to custody our data, have privacy without leaking our personal data to some place on the cyberspace. So all of these questions are something that social media maybe 5 years ago was not even in the mainstream narrative, at least not in the mainstream narrative, which in the bubble or information exposure that I had. I know Noster has been in works and discussions at least since 2018 or 19. I know William Catherine has been working on it, but even before Nostr, there have been attempts, of course. There have been Mastodon, and I think some other social medias as well. But Mastodon is the one I know that became pretty popular. But yeah, other than that, I think it's so obvious now at this point that big tech is it's so bad for you that not in it's not even important for people uh, to be educated about this. It's more and more people are becoming self-aware that it's taking more value than giving people value, but it has its own incentive mechanism that it's definitely difficult to opt out. So I am somebody who values privacy, but I am forced to use WhatsApp every day because that's where the network is, that's where activity is. And so for better or worse, social media changes human behavior, and yeah, in more ways than I think even I can articulate. One way, of course, is also that I think a certain aspect of relationships have become online. I think Bitshala is also one another example that it's an online community primarily. Of course, there are physical events, but relationships and work happens now more and more with people uh, with working with other people which they might never have even met of, and they do not really also care, which is perhaps impossible to even have imagined 30 years ago, or even maybe 10, 15 years ago. Agnivo says, or one can say, what info we gather about someone, we could have got that info offline. I'm sorry for the background noise. We could have got that info offline anyway if our lifespan was 200 years or so and our relationship with that person was long enough. Since that is not a possibility, we as a human have made it possible, not by increasing lifespan, but living more time in lesser years. So it just makes us a greater race. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think that's like the definition of technology, that it helps us save time and it helps us have more capabilities. So internet, of course, is like the mother of all communication technologies now, which one out of which is Bitcoin. And Bitcoin does not depend on the internet, but it uses internet primarily as the mechanism to propagate transactions block, which yeah, I think it's Hayek's quote that money is the most is the greatest knowledge distribution system, and internet allows that because it allows freedom loving people to find each other, which otherwise we would have probably required 200 years ago to even find who are the people who value freedom. Because yeah, I think every bitcoiner can testament to this fact that it's difficult to articulate very simple ideas of why theft is wrong and why fiat currency is thieving, is stealing your money. So yeah, every bitcoiner has been forced to find like-minded people on the internet. Yeah, this would not have been possible without the internet, or we would have taken a lot of time to even think of doing that. Beyond its capacity to reveal our differences, the internet, first and foremost, embodies our profound potential for connection. It bridges geographical divides and connects us with individuals and communities that resonate with our deepest values and aspirations. Technologies like social media, video calls, and Bitcoin unveil a horizon of possibilities where the constraints of traditional systems begin to dissolve. Yep. The ability to connect with like minded souls across the globe sends a beacon of hope to those seeking to forge their path, find their tribe, and opt out of systems and structures that no longer serve their highest good. This emerging paradigm champions each individual's right to define their existence, live according to their moral values, and connect with others who share their vision for the world. Opting in is the new opting out. Yep, yep. So the word paradigm itself, to the best of my explanation, means something that you are able to see, something that makes sense to you, if not physically see, if a more metaphorical thing is required. Hi, so Jayant asks, why do you say Bitcoin doesn't need internet? So, and to the best of my technological understanding, Bitcoin doesn't need the internet that we use, which is governed by ICANN, which is one organization which regulates servers in most countries, because there are other networks that you can potentially use. Whether or not you fit that into the definition of internet, I think is more subjective. You can still call it mesh networks or other communication technologies the internet, because I think the internet is short for interconnected networks. So there is no strict definition of the internet, but the line connection that I am using currently connects to my ISP, and that ISP connects to a I can't remember the exact name, but those ISPs of my area of my network are connected to a central authority, and that authority is regulated by the government. So potentially, I can be turned off by speech by being able to communicate with others on the internet when my ISP decides that this person is not complying, or this person, I don't like this person essentially. So we can use other networks, even radio technology, to broadcast your Bitcoin transaction. So yeah, so that's my answer. So it does not need the internet. You can actually use the radio to transact Bitcoin as well. Okay, so basically you say it doesn't require control network. Yes. So imagine it like your full node is a which it is. It's a banking software, right? So you are a bank, and now you don't necessarily need the internet that we use to run Discord, to run WhatsApp, to watch movies, to send transaction and to send blocks. You can use other networks. Like I said, I think there is a great talk by Andreas on this, where he says the medium is not the message. It's actually a great. I'll quickly just share the link in chat as well. I definitely recommend it to anybody who's interested in understanding that why Bitcoin is actually not even dependent on the internet, which is which still blows my mind. I'm still not able to completely understand it, but I don't know if you guys can see my YouTube. Yeah, you can. The message medium is not the message. So it talks about how you can potentially theoretically also use uh, pigeons to transact Bitcoin, right? So you can create a transaction, you can have a pigeon send it to another full node, and of course that creates all sorts of UX and scaling issues. But the fact that a full node does not rely on the internet to receive transactions and to verify transactions, because the processing happens on your system, on your machine, is the breakthrough that this is probably the only technology which works without relying on one medium of communication. Why am I not able to find it? A Antonov medium is not the message. I'm pretty sure that was the title. Yeah, I don't know why YouTube is not currently showing it. Yeah, I'll try to find it later. But yeah, if somebody has not gone through the Andreas Antonopoulos rabbit hole, which is like which is where I started, so I have my own bias, but he covers a lot of concepts in very articulate manner. Agnivo edited a text. Yeah, Agnivo, please feel free to share anything if you want to. But yeah, I'll try to share more resources on this giant. Of course, this is a big claim, and this is very important that Bitcoin does not rely on the internet to work. So I'll try to share more resources on that. Yeah, so just reading this again. Yeah, so this emerging paradigm champions each individual's right to define their existence, live according to their moral values, and connect with others who share their vision for the world. So Bitcoin is a deeply individual revolution. It's based on freedom, which means that you get into voluntary contracts. So everyone running a full node is voluntarily doing that. Nobody is asking you to run a full node. So this is the first time that governance itself, or money, or social systems are deeply individualistic, because everybody can participate in this network however they want. You can fork Bitcoin and you can create your own Bitcoin, and if you're able to communicate how that is better, then you win. But that's not empirically, that has been not true, because Bitcoin itself has been able to give value to more and more people, and it does not require any change at the protocol level. So yeah, fundamentally, this is the first time that every individual has the power to create his own paradigm, and in that world, opting in becomes the new opting out, because you opt into Bitcoin because you realize that this is these are the rules that define a sound money, and you opt out of other monetary systems, which right now is only fiat standard. As we stand on the cusp of a new political reality, the contours of personal freedom and autonomy are becoming increasingly well defined. The future holds the possibility of an existence where the barriers to living life on one's own terms are ever diminishing, where the power of voluntarily connected individuals challenges and reshapes the status quo. Even though the journey towards this new reality is fraught with trade-offs and challenges, it has the potential for unprecedented freedom and philosophical fulfillment. So right, yeah, like I said, this puts it even so much better, that it holds possibility of an existence where the barriers to living life on one's own terms are ever diminishing. Because, like I said, Bitcoin is fundamentally an individualistic revolution. You are free to get into contracts with whoever you want to. Nobody forces you to do things a certain way in Bitcoin, other than follow the Bitcoin rules. Which, if you study sound money economics, you realize that those are the rules that are required to make a monetary system which is functional. And yep, this journey towards this new reality is fraught with trade-offs and challenges, but it has the potential for unprecedented freedom and philosophical fulfillment. This book explores the nuances of these trade-offs, examining the essence of freedom and the sacrifices that may be required to achieve it. Hopefully, it will make you challenge some fundamental questions about yourself and reflect on what you would be willing to give up in exchange for a life that genuinely reflects your values and desires. Is this still a Bitcoin book then? Yes and no, as we shall explore. First and foremost, it is a book about you. In embarking on this journey through the following pages, we invite you to read with an open heart and a curious mind, reflect on your place in the world, and consider how you can influence it by changing your perspectives. A hill is only worth dying on if it offers a valley to live in. By the way, it takes three skateboarders to screw in a light bulb, one to perform the task, and two to capture the moment and post it on TikTok. Right. So yeah, perhaps I believe the trade-offs are where the debate is happening, because Bitcoin to me represents the highest value, and to any Bitcoiner, I think Bitcoiner word is born out of that. And I could be wrong, of course. This is my subjective perspective and opinion. That Bitcoiner realizes the value proposition of Bitcoin. He does not necessarily need to be somebody who understands every nook and everything about Bitcoin, but somebody who understands the value proposition of Bitcoin, and that becomes a Bitcoiner. And as more and more individuals start to do that, we start to move into that new reality, that new political, economic, social reality. And towards that transition, there are trade-offs, which I think is the overarching debate that everybody around Bitcoin is having. Otherwise, we would have been on a Bitcoin standard tomorrow, right? If enough people already understand and value Bitcoin, they will become Bitcoiners, and we will move on to the Bitcoin standard. but there are challenges, there are trade-offs into going into that world. Yes, and this book will help us explore that. We have reached 2056. So, hey MSTRR, thank you for joining. I don't know how, I think you just joined, I'm not sure. But yeah, if you have questions, I won't be able to summarize the entire discussion so far. I'll try to do my best in doing that towards the end of the session. So we'll start with the first chapter, which is incentives. Um, I'll take a pause here. I've been speaking for a while. Yeah, would love to hear if anybody has any thoughts, anything to share. And if, even if they don't, it's fine. If you want to just lurk or listen. Okay, let's start. Incentives. Every action you take, every decision made by governments or corporations, every conflict that arises between nations, all are grounded in the intricate dance of competing incentives and strategies known as game theory. Game theory is a mathematical framework that analyzes strategic interactions between rational decision makers. It predicts choices and outcomes based on assumptions about preferences and incentives. Understanding game theory and its implications will help you comprehend the world around you and why things are the way they are. Incentives and strategies underpin everything from evolutionary biology to the delicate equilibrium of global politics to the ingenious incentive model underpinning Bitcoin. In other words, game theory permeates every facet of our world. Yeah, for me, I think I do not come from a mathematics background, but I always had an interest in mathematics in my plus two, especially, even if not in my childhood. So I don't think I heard of game theory until I got introduced to Bitcoin. But as far as I know, game theory is a mathematical subject that is taught to undergraduates of mathematics. I'm not sure if this is taught in school. Maybe I missed that lesson or I'm not able to recall it right now. But yeah, so this is at the core of Bitcoin because I think, and I'm sorry to take more time, but I'll actually read this again because I believe this is actually quite important. That every action we take, every decision made by anybody, be it government, corporation, every conflict that arises between them, they are all grounded in the intricate dance of competing incentives and strategies known as game theory. So, in a prehistoric world where humans were not advanced enough to cooperate, all of us would have wanted the most property out of just stealing from each other because that's the barbaric world. But of course, that never happened because that never scales and that is never effective or worth doing for anybody. So, what ends up happening is that we have incentives and strategies, and we have an intricate dance of relationships and cooperation, and that's how we work. And the study of that is game theory, and game theory is a mathematical framework. This was my attempt at understanding game theory, but it is taught to econ grads, MBA peeps more actually. Okay, I think I've heard that, but I was not sure. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so I have studied economics in college in a couple of semesters. It was Keynesian economics. I can't recall if game theory was taught to us, but maybe it is taught to more specialized subjects. We were only taught microeconomics and macroeconomics as an introduction. Yeah, and I know nothing about MBA, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, game theory perfectly is required for anybody who's trying to understand businesses and human relationships. I also had two econ courses. I'm talking about econ majors. Okay, great. Nice. Thank you, Agnibo. You've been sharing quite interesting things. Yeah. So game theory is a mathematical framework that analyzes strategic interactions between rational decision makers. It predicts choices and outcomes based on assumptions about preferences and incentives. So yeah, the core assumption here is that we always take rational decision makers into account and strategic interactions between them. It is predicting choices and outcomes based on assumptions about preferences and incentives. Understanding game theory and its implication will help you comprehend the world around you and why things are the way they are. Incentives and strategies underpin everything from evolutionary biology to the delicate equilibrium of global politics to the ingenious incentive model underpinning Bitcoin. In other words, game theory permeates every facet of our world. I think just as the naive revolutionary or at least wannabe revolutionary that I was, when I first got introduced to Bitcoin, when I first got introduced to central banking, my gut reaction or my primal instinct was to just um, not understand it. I was just going through major cognitive dissonance that if this is public information that there is an institution that just has the power to print money, bring more money into supply, create buy something called government bonds, making governments go deeper in deficit, which they never plan to repay, then clearly all of us should just not should do something about it immediately. So it was a major cognitive dissonance that I perhaps I'm still going through. But I think this humility that I've started to now understand comes when you understand human incentives more deeply. That history panned out a certain way. It's not as if central bank just came out of nowhere and everybody just had a say over it. And now because they had a say over it, they can also have a say over not having it. So it's not that simple, of course. And it took me a while to even understand that. But yeah, I think when you understand history, you understand how history panned out and why US dollar had the power to become the world reserve currency, why Richard Nixon had the power to take us off the gold standard without enough resistance that it did not happen. And game theory is the mathematical framework that helps us understand that. I'll quickly just read a couple of paragraphs and we'll finish off this session and open up for discussion or thoughts and comments. At its core, game theory is an exploration of strategy. It focuses on how individuals make decisions in situations where the outcome depends not only on their own choices but also on the choices of others. Game theory explains the dynamics of competition and cooperation in many contexts. The approach most likely to win a competition between actors eventually determines reality. Right. Simple example is that of chess. That in chess, your strategy does not only depend on your own choices. It's not as if it's not like what would be a good analogy. It's not like golf where your strategy is just to make the ball go in the put as soon as possible. And I'm not a golf fan, so if somebody here is, please do correct me. But to the best of my understanding, your actions are not really dependent on someone else because your efficiency or your proficiency in the sport only depends on your skills. But in a game like chess, you always have to take into account the other person's moves because that changes the dynamics of the game at every instance. So that is a simple example on a chessboard where the rules are well defined. But in things like global economics and political relationships between nation states, it becomes more complex because I believe it definitely does not have a clear answer because if we did, it would be much simpler to avoid wars. But the reality is that it's still a reality that wars are still taking place, and game theory allows us to at least build a framework to understand them and potentially also create a world where war becomes infeasible. And Bitcoin is the attempt or one of the tools to help make that happen. Game theory explains the dynamics of competition and cooperation in many contexts. The approach most likely to win a competition between actors eventually determines reality. Yeah, I think this like summarizes the history of the world. That the quote is that history is written by the winners. So whatever happened and whatever we are able to empirically study happened because somebody was able to apply that strategy effectively and was the winner of that cooperation or competition, and thereby determining the current day reality. I'll actually just stop here. I think this was a um, good first page reading, and then we can start in the next session from praxeology. I'll stop sharing my screen. If somebody has any feedback for me, the pace at which I'm doing, or yeah, if I'm making it boring for you guys, then please do let me know. That's something that I will actively work on. Yep, yep, yep. Okay, if no questions, thank you, Bala. Thank you, Agnivo. Thank you, Mr. RR.